There are letters that are never sent through the postal service, without red military stamps or national flag imprints. Yet they carry enough power to change the fate of a person, a family, even to bring down things that once seemed beyond doubt. Have you ever imagined that one day you'd receive news that your loved one had died, and then another letter arrives, claiming that person is still alive? How would you react? Believe it or not, pain or hope, or both, swirling in a storm of emotion with no way out. This is not a science fiction story. This is part of a real memory, perhaps even the memory of someone out there, quietly waiting for it to be told. And today I will tell you the opening chapter, the beginning of a chain of mysteries that, to this day, no one has fully been able to explain. Hopewell is a small town in the state of Virginia, USA. With a population of just over 20,000 people, it has nothing remarkable except for red-tiled roof houses, a few family-owned bakeries, and the main street named Jefferson stretching from the town square to the old cemetery. In the late 1960s, the Vietnam War was still raging fiercely, and Hopewell, despite being half a world away from the front lines, could not remain untouched. Every Monday morning, the town's post office would distribute letters to families with loved ones serving in the military. Mothers, wives, sisters stood in long lines under the wooden awning of the delivery station, hands trembling as they clutched notebooks, eyes fixed on the large canvas bag of the mailman, as if searching for hope in every small piece of paper. Sarah Whitmore was one of them. When James, her husband, went off to war, Sarah was just 27 years old and pregnant with their first child. They hadn't had much time together before James was deployed to Vietnam. The wedding was rushed. A small cake, a few family members, and a vow sealed inside the envelope James left on the wooden table, the same one where they used to sit and read the Bible together each night. "I will come back, starling. No matter what happens, remember, don't believe it if anyone says I'm dead." Sarah remembered every word, every period, every comma in that sentence. She read it every day like a sacred ritual, as if repeating it enough times would make the promise come true. But then, that day came, a December morning. The Virginia air sliced like a blade. Snow from the night before had not yet melted. Sarah was nursing her baby when there was a knock at the door. 3 knocks, fast and firm. She opened the door. A soldier in uniform stood on the porch. His face was somber, his eyes avoiding hers. In his hand was a yellow envelope bearing the seal of the Department of Defense. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. "We regret to inform you that Sergeant James Whitmore went missing during a firefight in Quang Tri Province, Vietnam. All search efforts have yielded no results. We will continue further investigation." The word missing, to the military, is sometimes just a softer way of saying dead. But to those left behind, it's a curse. No body, no funeral, just a void, more haunting and invisible than anything else. Sarah collapsed onto the floor, clutching the letter to her chest. Her baby cried. But she couldn't soothe her. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't hear anything, except the wind howling through the window and James's words echoing in her head. "Don't believe it if anyone says I'm dead." 7 days later, when grief began to morph into resignation, when Sarah began writing letters to her dead husband as a way to heal, another letter appeared. No official envelope, no seal, just a folded piece of paper, hastily shoved into the mailbox behind the iron gate. Sarah thought it was from a neighbor, but when she opened it, she froze. The handwriting, familiar. The name, Starling. The nickname James gave her in high school, a name no one else knew. And the message, a lightning bolt through her mind. Sarah, I don't have much time. If you're reading this letter, it means I'm still alive. I'm trapped on the other side. They don't know I'm alive. I'll find my way back. But I need you to believe me. Don't tell anyone. Wait for the next letter. James. Sarah trembled. Goosebumps rose on her arms. She read it 3 times. Each time her heart pounded harder. If he had gone missing, then why was there a letter? And if there was a letter, why wasn't it sent through official channels? Was this some cruel joke? A conspiracy? Or was James really still alive, trying to reach her from a place no one could imagine? Sarah didn't know. But she knew one thing. No one, absolutely no one, could forge James's handwriting. No one could write that sentence in that way. No one could have known the name Starling except him. And from that moment on, everything changed. Sarah was no longer a drifting widow in town. She became the guardian of the mailbox, as if it held the only thread connecting her to her husband. She began recording everything: dates, times, messages, like a secret investigation. No one in town knew, not even her mother. Because if James was truly alive, then this truth somehow had to be kept hidden. But who had put that letter in the mailbox? Who was the intermediary? And if James was alive, why did the military report him missing? Was something being covered up? Do you start to feel like something isn't right? Do you hear the ticking clock of time speeding up? Feel something approaching, a secret, an unspoken truth, gradually revealing itself. Sarah clutched the letter in her hand, feeling as though she were holding a beating heart. The handwriting, still the same, still slightly slanted to the right, with a faint trembling at the end of each line, especially in the letter J. James always wrote it with a slight lift, a distinct trait of a left-handed man trying to contain emotion with every stroke of ink. It couldn't be fake. How could it be? But then, if this was really from James, what did it mean? That he was still alive? That he was somewhere out there? Why did no one else know about it? And who delivered the letter? Who helped him? How did they know her exact location? A house at the end of Jefferson Street, with the white wooden porch, where she rocked her baby to sleep each day as the wind howled through the cracks in the windows. Sarah couldn't sit still. She immediately went back to the military's death notice. She laid both letters out on the table, comparing every word, every detail. The Pentagon's letter was clearly official, printed by machine, sharp text, formal language, cold enough to sting. But the other letter, full of emotion, personal, as if it were whispering directly into her ear through every line. It was hastily written, as if James had to hide each word under a flashlight deep in the jungle. No return address, no postal envelope. Just simply a message of life and death. Sarah's world at that moment split in two. One half claimed by the government that James was gone. The other, a nameless piece of paper full of hope. Who would you believe? A system or a gut feeling? An official notice or a tender sentence written in the darkness? Sarah didn't choose reason. She chose her heart. Because how could she deny something she had prayed for every night to come true? The next morning, she wrote a reply. For the first time in days, her fingers didn't tremble as she held the pen. She called James Jaybird, another nickname only the two of them knew. She told him their daughter had started walking, that she still sat under the oak tree as before, and that she was still waiting for him, as she had promised. She had no address to send the letter to, no mailbox, no instructions, until she noticed the last line in the first letter, under the big rock at the end of the backyard where we had our first kiss. Sarah froze. No one, absolutely no one, could have known that. That was where James had hidden the wedding ring when he first proposed, witnessed only by a squirrel and the summer moonlight. She went to the backyard. The rock was still there, silent and old, like a witness to the past. She lifted it. Nothing. But a thought flashed in her mind. If he had delivered a letter, he would come back to retrieve a reply. Like a dangerous game, a two-way path through the invisible veil between life and death. From that day on, Sarah became someone who lived between two worlds. By day, she went to the market, cared for her child, occasionally attended church like any other widow. But by night, she became the letter keeper. She wrote, hid letters under the rock, and waited. A week later, the second letter arrived. This time, the contents were clearer. I escaped the ambush, but my unit thought I had died. Separated from them, I was taken in by an old Vietnamese man and have been hiding in the mountains. Don't worry, I'm alive. But don't let anyone know. Don't inform the military. I'm not sure what label they've put on me in their files. I just know. If they find out I'm alive, everything could get worse. Sarah couldn't breathe after reading it. Worse? What did he mean? What would the U.S. military do to a soldier who returned from the dead? Why didn't James trust the very organization that had sent him to war? Her confusion only deepened. But then, the last line melted her heart. Starling, you are the only light I can still see in the night. Who could forge a love like that? And more importantly, if this were all a hoax, what was the purpose? Who would spend weeks just to deceive a grieving woman? No. Sarah believed it was James, with all her reason, with every instinct she had. Things began to grow stranger. One day, while at the market, Sarah spotted a strange man standing near the post office. He stared at her for a long time. Didn't speak, didn't smile. But his eyes, there was something sorrowful in them, as if he knew what she was hiding. She walked faster, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The next day, the letter arrived late, and it had one more line of warning. They may have traced the signal. I have to move. If the letter doesn't arrive on time, wait 3 more days. Sarah began to question. Who were they? The government? The military? The enemy? Or some nameless force? Deep down, she sensed that James was running not just from the war, but from the very people he once fought beside. She brought all the letters to the local police station. She didn't submit them, just discreetly asked about the ink and paper's authenticity. The old officer smirked. Mrs. Whitmore, I know your pain, but sometimes faith makes us see things that aren't really there. Sarah didn't respond. She just withdrew, carrying the letters home, holding them like precious relics. The story didn't end there. One night, while rocking her baby to sleep, she heard footsteps in the yard. Soft, steady, stopping at the stone. She peeked through the curtain, but saw no one. The next morning, beneath the stone was a new letter. I'm leaving this place. It may be a few weeks before I can write again, but believe me, I will come home. Then silence. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. No letters came. Sarah began to wonder. Had she been wrong? Was it all just a web of illusions spun by a stranger? But if so, why were the private memories so accurate? Have you ever found yourself trapped between two worlds? One side is stamped truth, with witnesses, with records. The other is instinct, love, and letters carrying the soul of the person you believe is still alive. Sarah chose the second, and that very choice was what kept her alive through each night of waiting. No one understood. No one believed. But she believed. Because whoever wrote those letters knew her heart better than anyone else. 3 weeks passed. Sarah counted each day, each hour, like a living clock suspended between past and present. Since the last letter, James's note saying he would have to move and might not contact her for a few weeks, everything had fallen into a hazy silence. No letters, no footsteps, no strange signs in the yard. The stone remained still, like a lonely witness in a dead garden. And in that silence, hope began to give way to doubt. Was it all a joke? A sophisticated setup? A cruel game taking advantage of a young widow's grief? But if so, who could fabricate such precise details? How could they know about the cat that died in 1962? How could they know her left pinky finger bent slightly from a childhood bike fall? No, this couldn't be fake. Sarah began to take action. She felt she couldn't sit still anymore. Waiting had turned into torture, and she knew if she didn't do something, it would all slip away like a dream without an end. That morning, she returned to the police station, not to ask vague questions this time, but to investigate for herself. "Can you help me verify the handwriting?" She held out the 3 letters James had sent, carefully laminated like sacred artifacts. The officer on duty that day was a young man named Brett, just over 30. Unlike the old officer before, Brett didn't scoff. He looked at the handwriting, flipped the pages back and forth, and went silent for a moment. "You know, I served 2 years in Guam," he said. "The handwriting of a soldier writing in the jungle, it's very specific. The pressure marks, the tilt, the spacing, these things aren't easy to fake. I think whoever wrote this letter really was in the field." Sarah clenched her hands. "Can you help me trace the paper? Or the ink, maybe?" Brett nodded. "The analysis lab at Central Headquarters can help, but it'll take a few weeks." Sarah agreed. To her, a few weeks wasn't the scariest thing. Not knowing was the silent killer. Back home, she reopened the old box where James used to keep personal documents. Letters he sent from the army, tiny sticky notes, maps of the Middle East from training days. All were laid out. She compared, cross-referenced, took notes. Half of her had already become an investigator. And then, she found something strange. A small triangular symbol in the top left corner of the second letter. It wasn't clear, just a faint mark made by pencil or watery ink. But she remembered. James used to draw a similar symbol in his tactical notebook. It wasn't an official military marking, but his own way of noting spots on maps during reconnaissance. Temporarily safe. Sarah's spine chilled. If James was using his old code again, it meant he wasn't just alive but deliberately trying to communicate. He wanted her to understand something through each letter. He wasn't just writing out of love. He was sending signals. In a dangerous survival game, only the two of them understood. But then, another haunting question emerged. Why didn't the military know James was still alive? It couldn't be that no one saw him. It couldn't be that an American soldier disappeared, then reappeared, then wrote letters, and an entire system of intelligence, satellites, and surveillance remained unaware. Or did they know and simply not say? That thought terrified Sarah. She remembered the gaze of the strange man outside the post office. That look wasn't mere curiosity. It was the stare of someone watching. She began to wonder, were the letters being monitored? Was hiding them under the stone really safe? Had James ever been followed? And more importantly, why didn't he dare to communicate publicly? That night, Sarah decided to go further. She wrote a new letter, this time not about their daughter, not about love. Just one single line. If someone is stopping you from reaching me, leave a mark in the next letter, a symbol, anything. I will understand. She hid the letter under the stone as usual, but this time she didn't retreat into the house. She stood in the shadows a few meters away, hidden behind the oak tree. 1 hour, 2 hours. Then she saw it. A figure. Tall, thin, wearing a long coat, moving stealthily like a scout. The person stepped to the stone, crouched down, opened it, took the letter and slipped something back in. Sarah held her breath. When the figure left, she ran over. Inside the stone compartment was a small piece of paper, folded in quarters. Inside, no words. Just a drawing, a triangle, and this time, with a black dot in the center. She went back to Brett. The black dot in the center, in Morse code, or battlefield symbols. It could mean target locked. What does that mean in this context? Brett was silent for a long time. If it were me, I'd think the person drawing that is saying, I'm being watched. I can't escape. I'm being targeted. Sarah felt the ground collapse beneath her. James was truly in danger. Hope was no longer just a faint light. It had become a driving force. She wrote letters daily, providing updates about the town, strange visitors, subtle changes around the house. Gradually, she and James built a form of parallel communication, bypassing all systems of control. They wrote like two wartime spies. Sarah began training herself. She learned to encode symbols, use diluted ink, even experimented with lemon juice to write invisible ink, like a true spy. Love was no longer just a feeling. It became a form of resistance. A quiet rebellion against something larger, more mysterious than any battle out there. But then, one day everything stopped. No more letters. No more glimpses of the man in the night. No signals of any kind. 1 week, 2 weeks, a month. Sarah felt like she had fallen into a deep pit of despair. She went to the post office asking about every possible trace. She went to church to pray. She walked all over town asking anyone who might have ever heard the name James Whitmore. It was useless. Every lead had vanished. And then, a letter arrived. Not from James, but from the Department of Defense. This time, it was the official death notification. Remains identified. Uniform matches. No doubt. Sarah held the letter, eyes dry. No tears, no reaction. Just a single question echoed in her head. If James was dead, then what were those letters? Who wrote them? And if it was all fake, why did it bring so much hope that she was willing to trade away reason to believe it? April 1971. Hopewell awakened from a long winter with gentle spring breezes and the soft chirping of cicadas hinting at summer. The old oak tree behind Sarah's house also began to bloom, its green shoots budding as if winter had never frozen anything. But her heart remained frozen, unable to thaw. 2 months had passed since James's last letter with the distress symbol. More than 3 weeks since the military sent the notice that his body had been identified. That letter had lain on the table since the day it arrived, unopened. She couldn't touch it, couldn't face it, because deep inside, a quiet voice kept whispering, "It's not over. James isn't dead." But could that possibly be true? When the whole world tells you one thing, but your heart insists on the opposite, who do you believe? How many times in life do we trade truth to protect a belief? And how long before that belief becomes madness? Sarah didn't know, but she knew she couldn't move on without an answer. One early morning, before the sun had fully risen, she went out to the backyard as always, a habit too hard to break. She no longer hoped for anything. But still, she went. Still bent down and lifted the stone, its corner now worn from the countless times she had flipped it up and placed it back. Nothing. Just bare earth. She sighed, then turned to go back inside. But just as she closed the door, a strange sound came from the gate. The soft screech of wheels. Footsteps. A shadow. Approaching. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. Not a delivery man. Not a neighbor. She didn't recognize the figure. Tall, thin, shoulders slightly hunched forward like someone who'd carried a backpack for too long. A worn, faded coat. Disheveled hair. Dusty shoes like he'd walked hundreds of miles without rest. She gripped the doorknob tightly. The person came closer, slowly, silently. When only a few meters separated them, he stopped. She recognized the eyes. The world exploded inside her mind. James. Every emotion burst forth at once. Shock, joy, disbelief, fear, and something stranger still. A feeling that she couldn't quite believe this was real. He stood there, not stepping forward, not reaching out, just looking. Sarah trembled. "Is it really you?" James nodded, slow and steady, as if he feared a nod too fast would shatter the moment. "I didn't know if you'd still recognize me," he said, his voice hoarse like someone relearning how to speak after months of silence. Sarah stepped closer, without thinking, without questions, without needing proof. She wrapped her arms around him, buried her face in his chest, as if the whole world had collapsed and rebuilt itself in a single second. After everything, he was still alive. James told her everything that night. He hadn't died in the ambush as reported. In the chaos, he was separated from his unit, sustained minor injuries, and was hidden by a Vietnamese family in a small village. By the time he tried to return, his unit had already withdrawn. His radio was dead. Within days, his file was updated to missing. And then, killed in action. But it didn't end there. When James tried to contact another military unit, he was detained for questioning. Why? Because no one could verify his identity. His file had already been closed. A dead man couldn't come back to life. Every step he took drew him deeper into a maze of bureaucracy, documents, and suspicion. At one point, he was held at a small military base near Da Nang, not allowed to communicate with the outside world. Only when an old soldier named Hart, someone who had served with James, recognized him during a routine inspection, did things begin to shift. But Hart couldn't help him publicly. He feared that if James's survival was revealed without proper procedure, he himself would be investigated. So, he helped James send letters covertly, through a hand delivery network. No seals, no official traces, all handwritten. Those letters traveled thousands of miles, passed through countless silent hands, to reach Sarah. Sarah remained quiet for a long time after hearing it all. Then, the body they identified. "Wasn't me," James answered. "It may have been a comrade too disfigured to recognize. They just wanted to close the file, wrap it up." She shivered. "So, do they know you've come back?" James looked at her. "I'm not sure, but I'm not a soldier anymore. I just want to be your husband, our daughter's father. Nothing more." The next day, James turned himself in at the local military office. He told the full story, submitted all the evidence. As he had suspected, his file had been officially marked "killed in action" since January of that year. All procedures were reopened. An internal investigation was conducted quietly, and eventually, James's records were resurrected, though nothing was made public. No press, no welcome ceremony, no flags, no trumpets, just James and Sarah, and their daughter. They later moved to Oregon, another small town where no one knew they had once died and come back. James opened a woodworking shop. Sarah started a bookstore. They lived quietly, happily. No one in town knew he had once been declared dead in the Vietnam War. To them, James was just the kind carpenter who loved his wife and brewed strong coffee every morning. But, you know what? Sarah kept all the letters. She laminated them, noted the dates and times, like a living diary. And the strange thing was, among all the letters James had sent, one was missing from her hands. The last one. The one she had never read. James didn't even remember writing it. They turned everything over, searched every clue, and still couldn't find it. Where did that letter go? Who held it? Could it be that part of the story remained untold? 5 years after James returned from death, the little wooden house on the outskirts of Oregon was covered in ivy and smelled of baked apple pies every afternoon. James, now a gentle middle-aged man, was familiar with saws, planes, and the echo of timber in the workshop behind the house. Sarah spent most of her time at the roadside bookstore she had named the Silent Letters. No one in town knew about the years they had lived between two worlds. No one knew that the man who always bowed politely at the gas station had once been recorded as dead on a battlefield in Vietnam. And no one knew that the soft-spoken woman who gave speeches at the local book fair had once written dozens of letters into the void, hoping her husband was still alive somewhere out there. Life seemed settled, peaceful enough to be called an ending, quiet enough to close a chapter of the past. But was it really? One June evening, Sarah was cleaning the old shelves to prepare for renovations. When she reached the bottom drawer, where she kept the books James had mailed from the war, she found a strange envelope, wrapped in cloth. No seal, no date. The handwriting faded, but just clear enough to recognize. It was James's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. This letter had never reached her. No one knew how it got there. No one remembered placing it. No one remembered who had delivered it. Even James, when Sarah showed him the letter, fell silent. his face slowly changing, as though he had just touched something beyond memory and time. My starling, if you're reading this letter, it means I failed to make it back, or I was stopped. Maybe you've been told that I'm dead, but know this, I never stopped trying to return to you. They might label me anything, deserter, traitor, mentally unstable, but if I had to choose again, I would still send those letters. I would still try to trace your memory in every corner of my mind. And if one day I can't return, I want you to believe, somewhere I still live. In your memory, in our daughter, and in everything we ever wrote to each other. James finished reading, saying nothing. He walked into the yard, sat beneath the maple tree where they used to drink tea in the evenings. She sat beside him, asking nothing. There was only the sound of wind, the flapping of birds on the tiled roof, and two hearts beating in sync, in silence. That letter was a goodbye from a moment neither of them could fully remember, as if it were an emotional will from James himself, the man once declared dead, then resurrected in the silence of the system. A big question began forming in Sarah's mind. If this letter wasn't among the ones James had sent before, if even James didn't remember writing it, and it appeared now, 5 years later, who had kept it? And why now? Could someone else have been watching them from afar? A silent figure who once helped James pass letters in the dark, now returning the final fragment of memory as a way to complete the story? Or was it an invisible hand trying to remind them, though they believed it was all over, part of the truth always remains beyond understanding? Have you ever felt that there are things in life that will never be explained? Letters without senders that arrive at the perfect moment? Memories you thought were lost, returning softly, full of quiet meaning? Sarah no longer tried to explain it. She simply placed that letter into the small wooden box along with the others James had written, closed the lid, locked it. But this time, not to hide it, rather, to preserve it. Later that year, their daughter, Lily, then 7 years old, read the letters her parents once exchanged. Though she didn't understand them fully, she hugged her parents tightly and said, "I think you both won the war in your own way." James's final letter, the one no one knew where it came from, no one remembered writing, is still kept in that old wooden box in Sarah's bookstore. It isn't locked. It isn't displayed. It simply rests in a drawer, as though no one wants to open it again. But no one dares throw it away either. And then, their story didn't end with those post-war years. It spread, then took root. One day, a stranger visited the bookstore, The Silent Letters. She was an elderly woman, hair pure white, wearing a thick coat even though it wasn't cold. She didn't buy anything, just wandered through the shelves, her gaze lingering a long while at a small corner displaying wartime books. Then she came to the counter and softly asked, "You're Sarah, aren't you?" Sarah nodded, surprised. The woman opened her bag and took out an old piece of paper, handing it to her. "My husband fought with James. I think you should read this." Then she left, saying nothing more, leaving no name, never returning again. Sarah unfolded the paper. It was a short journal entry, handwritten, hurried. "We found him after the explosion. James was still breathing, but no one knew his name. Records didn't match. Command wanted to forget it, said there was no need to report. But I couldn't accept that. I wrote everything down. If someone ever comes looking, they need to know he lived." Below the text was a name initialed E. Marshall. Have you ever felt that there are pieces of memory the world forgets, but that never truly vanish? Maybe someone, somewhere, is still holding the missing part of your story, waiting, like a final puzzle piece not yet placed. And then, all it takes is one day, one chance meeting, and everything becomes clear. From that day on, Sarah began collecting other stories. From those who received death notices but still held on to hope. From those who once felt they're still out there, somewhere. Whispers lost in phone calls, vague traces in journals, silhouettes that felt unreal, but haunted like truth. And do you know what's strange? Not everyone was reunited. Not everyone had an ending like Sarah and James. But nearly everyone she spoke with, despite the losses, despite the wounds, shared one thing in common. They had believed. Even when the whole world didn't, they left a small window open for the impossible. Sarah began writing down her own story, not as a memoir, but as a message. She didn't romanticize the past. She told of moments when she doubted herself. The nights she thought James was truly gone. The mornings she was too afraid to go into the yard, fearing disappointment again. But in every sentence, every line, you could feel one thing. She never stopped waiting. James read the first draft, then sat in silence for a long time. "Who do you think will read it?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Someone who once wrote a letter, but never dared to send it. And maybe that someone is you? Have you ever written a letter so long that you didn't dare read it again? A message that was never sent. A note saved in your phone. An email that never had the courage to be sent. Could it be that somewhere in your heart, someone is still alive, in memory?" Sarah wasn't the only one telling stories. After her book was published in a limited run and turned into a podcast, many people began writing letters to the bookstore, the silent letters. Every week she received at least 3 to 5 envelopes, not to buy books, but to share their own stories. Stories they had never dared to tell. One wrote about a father who went to war and never returned, but every birthday, someone would still send a postcard. No return address. Another spoke of a letter found in an old suitcase with the words, "Don't be sad, my child. I'll still walk with you in your dreams." And some only wrote a single line, "I understand. I waited too." When you walk away from a story like this, a story of lost letters, a man returned from the dead, a love that transcends time and truth, what will you carry with you? Curiosity, emotion, or a silent feeling, as if you've just received an unsigned letter and the sender might be your own past? In this final part, I won't continue the story of Sarah and James. They have lived their full story. No more chapters needed. But you are different. You, the one sitting here, looking at the screen, listening to every word, you are still writing your own story. And I want to ask you a simple question, but the most important one of this entire story. What letter are you keeping in your heart? The letter you never sent, the one you once wrote, then tore up. The letter you once read, but never had the courage to reply to. Is it an apology you never got to say? Or a "I forgive you" you only whispered to yourself? Or maybe a name still saved in your contacts, but you no longer dare to call? The story of Sarah and James is just a lantern, a quiet light shining into the hazy corners of our hearts, where we hide the unexplained, the unresolved. And the surprising thing is, We all have an unsent letter. Did you realize that? When you heard about James sending letters in the dark, unknown, unbelieved, did someone come to mind? When Sarah stood in the rain, lifting that stone again and again, hoping for just a scrap of paper, who did you think of? When she held the final letter, not understanding why it appeared at just the right moment, did you suddenly think, maybe I've received a sign like that once, but missed it? You know, in this life sometimes we move too fast, live too quickly, that we forget the things that seem small, but carry immense weight. A word left unsaid, a gesture not given in time, or a letter never sent. The story of Sarah and James isn't just a wartime love song. It's a reminder. Never underestimate the power of belief. Because it was belief, not evidence, that kept Sarah from giving up. And it was belief that carried James through the seemingly impossible. We can't always control everything: war, loss, separation, or the silence of those we love. But we can choose not to stay silent with ourselves. The lesson here isn't to wait forever. It's to dare to believe, dare to hope, and dare to write down what you've never said out loud. So what about you? What letter are you keeping in your heart? Have you ever regretted something left unsaid? Is there someone you want to forgive or ask forgiveness from? Leave a comment below. It could be a feeling, a memory, or simply the sentence, "I have an unsent letter." Don't be shy, because maybe you will be the one who inspires someone else who needs hope. And if you feel this story touched you in some way, share this video with someone you love, and hit subscribe, because many more stories, emotional, honest, and deeply human, are waiting for you ahead. Thank you for staying until the very last second. See you in the next story. And don't forget, write your own letter today.